Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win at the game, on it 1, 2, 3 cycle out at the old ball game. Casey for all the games, knew the players by their first name.
Hi folks, welcome to Talking Baseball. I'm Pete Lincoln, this is Jason Smith.
Hello again.
And this is Season 8, Episode 1.
7 seasons under our belt,
We're starting Season 8, and you may have noticed a little bit different opening that we've had for the last 7 years.
You are watching the right show, everyone. It's still us.
What we've been using for all these episodes has been the guitar of Doc Watson and his son Merle, who were tremendous country guitarists, and they did Talking Baseball as our theme song, but we're beginning to get some claims that perhaps we didn't have the right to use copyrighted music.
Yes, we fell victim to the little thing that pops up on YouTube and it says you cannot use this song. So we are copyright infringers apparently.
So we've stopped using that, even though we still love Doc Watson. And what we've come up with, I think this will surprise some of you folks out there, the first recording ever made of Take Me Out to the Ball Game.
Here it is right here.
Here's the record. This was first produced in 1908. The song was written by Albert von Tilzer and sung by Harry Conmeyer. Von Tilzer was the pop, right? He was the Neil Diamond of his time.
Yes.
He wrote I'll Be With You in Apple Blossom Time, for instance, some of you people might know. He passed away in 1946. That exceeds the 75-year copyright record. So we're able to present this with no fear of copyright infringement. And the fact that you're able to hear a song from a record that I got from my grandmother that she had in her attic with all her World War I records. It also is the first 78 record that was two-sided with a song on each side.
How cool is that?
So you are hearing antique music produced. This fellow sang this song 115 years ago just for our show.
That's right. So just 115 years later, we're using it. So take that, Don Henley. That doesn't show up in your little YouTube equation there.
So it's the same show, just a little different tune. Fidelity's a little less, but the sincerity is right with us.
Who cares? That's and you know, I don't know. I'm 46, but I'm sorry. I love this kind of stuff. The old blues and jazz and
right.
The stuff just from the turn of the century is just it's great stuff.
1908 Columbia record, recorded in February. First time this song was ever heard. How many times has it been sung or heard since?
I don't know. That's why
this is number one.
It's the first one. So you're listening to history here, folks.
Now, we have another little bit of history.
We do.
In fact, yes. We're going to pass on a tip that might make some of you folks out there some money.
Yes.
The Topps Baseball Company has been making baseball cards since 1948, and at one time I've had them all.
Yeah, right.
They are producing a series for the last 3 years called Topps Living. They're taking the 1953 format where the ball players were drawn on the cards rather than photographed. And they're issuing them 2 per week for just a week.
Stay on top of it, everyone.
2 per week. And the players are both contemporary players and players of the past. So there'll be Manny Machado and Babe Ruth in the same pack. So far, they've gotten up to number 480 of these cards. And there's been about 75 players from the past and about 400 players from the present. 2 weeks ago, they issued this card of Tristan McKenzie.
Oh, hold it up.
Tristan McKenzie.
There he is.
See if you can figure out what's unique about this. Who does he play for? Tristan McKenzie plays for the Cleveland Guardians.
Now, we've talked on the show before about how the Indians changed their name to the Guardians. This is the first ever baseball card
produced by of a Guardian.
Of a Cleveland Guardian.
Now, Tristan
That's the first
McKenzie
one.
has won 2 games and lost 1.
I had never heard of him before this card, to be honest.
But this
with you.
card is going to be sought after by card collectors. I went on eBay just for the fun of it. It's been out 2 or 3 weeks now. I went out on eBay and they were selling between $50 and $150
Already.
already.
So.
And they're only out there for a week, so you can only get them
Right.
through card collectors or eBay.
So stock up on them now,
and
folks.
if you can find a Tristan McKenzie card in the Guardian, I would say hold on to it.
Absolutely.
Because most current baseball cards aren't worth much, but this one is.
This one is.
This
So
one
the
is.
first Guardians, and also a bit of history here. I don't know how many of you get Sports Weekly. I know that newspapers and magazines and such have fallen by the wayside.
I have to hold
but-
this up. This week's Sports Weekly has the double-page spread on the Cleveland Guardians.
The first Guardians
This is
spread.
the Guardians lineup, the Guardians schedule, the Guardians park lookalikes. We're talking about Guardians now.
Yes.
Now, what I think makes this really unique is Cleveland was one of the original AL teams
Right.
in 1901.
Right, one of the original 8.
The
Right.
first year they were called the Cleveland Blues. The second year, 1902, they were called the Cleveland Broncos. And then from 1903 until 1914, they were called the Naps because Nap Lajoie was their star, and so they called the team after their star.
Hall of Famer, very huge turn of the century player, one of the best guys ever. Look him
But
up
they
sometime.
have been named the Indians since 1915. So for the last 106 years,
Yeah, 106.
they've been the Cleveland Indians. And all of a sudden, they're the Guardians.
So it'll probably take me another decade before I stop calling them the Indians because I'm so used to it.
Now, you might remember the show in which we suggested there are lots of other teams that perhaps had their names changed.
Right.
We won't go through that.
No,
again.
we won't. No, you
It
can.
was pretty funny.
That's in the archive on YouTube if you want to look that
when
one
we
up.
decided the Red Sox should be called the Traffic Jam, the White Sox should be called the Layovers,
Right.
and they would never play because they couldn't get together.
Right. But this is history in the making here, folks. I can't remember the last. Now I remember teams changing locations,
Right.
You know, but I don't remember a team changing its name like that. I can't remember the last time
In
that
fact,
happened.
especially in football, they moved and kept the same name.
Right.
Or
Yes.
in basketball, so it doesn't make any
Oh, right,
sense
yeah,
that
right.
the L.A. Lakers,
Right.
Minnesota, or the Lakers,
or the Utah Jazz. That
yeah,
made no
it
sense
makes
whatsoever.
no sense at
Yeah,
all. But
right.
they didn't change the actual name, make
Right.
a new name.
Right.
And Jazz wasn't offensive, Lakers wasn't offensive.
Right. So they didn't change it at all. Yeah.
So this is quite a moment.
Right, it
folks.
really is, yeah. And it's happening in football that the Washington football team is going to pick its new name for next year too. So there may be more in the works.
Well,
we
they
never
can't,
know.
They can't use Guardians.
Right,
But
it
that's
can't be
gone.
the Guardians.
That's
it's done.
that's something else. Well, this is the time of the show where we've been doing what we call Fenway Memories.
Yes, Fenway Memories.
Jake and I have been to so many ball games over the last, for me, 70 years, and for
Me,
him, for him
35
80
years, yeah, right.
Between us, 100.
It's a lot of years between us.
That we thought we'd pick a particular fond memory or peculiar memory,
Right.
and just let the folks out there know some of the things that we've seen.
And
over
these
the time.
and these games were actually both of these games we're talking about. I'm pretty sure they're available on YouTube if people want to watch them. They are out. I know mine's out there. I'm pretty sure yours is out there. So do you want to go first, or do you want
Yeah,
me to
you
lead
go
off?
ahead, you go ahead.
Okay. So my favorite Fenway memory is appropriate. We'll get into the Hall of Fame later, but as you know, Big Papi was just inducted into the Hall of Fame a couple days ago.
Yeah.
So I thought I would do my biggest Papi moment that I witnessed.
Great.
So this is back in 2003. It was the first year that Papi really came into his own as a clutch player. If you remember, when the Sox first acquired Papi, he was platooning with Jeremy Giambi.
Right.
If you remember that,
Right.
that blast from the past. And Papi just took over the position and didn't let it go for the next 18 years.
Well,
or whatever
Giambi
it
went
was.
into a slump for a couple of weeks.
Right, he did.
Pedro was just talking about that the other day.
Yep,
right.
sure he was. So 2003 in the ALDS, the Red Sox were the wild card because the Yankees won the division. They ended up playing the Oakland A's in 2003. Now, that Oakland A's team was really good. If you look that up, that 03
right.
team was really good. So the Sox went out to Oakland and lost twice. Came back to Fenway and through a miracle of a Trot Nixon homer won Game 3. And my then girlfriend, now wife, and I stumbled into tickets for Game 4. So Game 4 happens. We were way the heck down in the horrible right field seats where you're looking at the bleachers. But we were there. It's a playoff game. You can't be choosy when it comes to a playoff game.
Some good stuff goes on in the bleachers.
Right. And it was, I remember it was a weekend afternoon, so it was the sun was setting, so it was middle of October. And the Red Sox were starting John Burkett. I don't know if you remember this guy. And he was a finesse guy. He'd go through the lineup twice and then get crushed the third time through because they figured him out. Now, and I've never figured it out to this day, the Oakland A's went with Tim Hudson, who's a borderline Hall of Famer. He's the ace pitcher for them. They were ahead 2-1 in the series and pitched Hudson on 3 days rest. And I could never figure out why they did this. Well, Hudson got hurt after the first inning. So they had to take Hudson out, and this guy named Steve Sparks comes in, shuts the Sox down. And the A's go ahead 4-2 against Burkett. Damon hit a homer. That was the only offense they got. And I don't know if you remember this guy. He works for MLB Network. Eric Burns missed a grand slam by about this much from the pesky pole. We were sitting about 2 rows from the pesky pole, landed from about us to the camera, and was like, oh my God, if that was 3 feet that way, we lose the series. But Burkett got out of it. They were losing 4-2, came back. Nomar, I think, somebody hit, I think it was Nomar, hit a home run to make it 4-3. Bottom of the 8th inning, the Sox are losing 4-3. In comes, do you remember who the A's closer was that year?
No.
Keith Folk, who would later join the Red Sox the next year. The next year, Keith Folk comes trotting in.
Who threw the last pitch in the World Series?
Yes, he did, yep. So he comes trotting in out of the A's bullpen in the 8th inning, and with 2 outs, Nomar gets a hit, Manny gets a hit. 2 guys on, Poppy comes up. Poppy was 0 for 13 in the series previous to that at bat. Knocks a double down the right field line, knocks in 2 runs. The Sox win 5-4, and we went on to win Game 5 out in Oakland. And that was the first clutch hit that Poppy got with the Red Sox. That was like his baptism into being Mr. Clutch for the Red Sox that game. That was his first big postseason hit with the Red Sox. Think of how many he had in the course of his career. But that was his first one, and we all know what happened in 2003 against the Yankees. We won't go into that. But it was such a thrill that we were there to witness Poppy's big first postseason clutch hit. And how out of the dozens he would get, that was number 1. So that's my Fenway memory from 2003.
We probably should have called this show the David Ortiz Show.
We probably should have.
We're going to do a lot of talking about him.
Right.
Before I give my memory, I want to be sure to give thanks to our staff. Dan Seminator is doing our video, and Deb Lincoln is doing our pictures, and Joe, our production, Joe McLaughlin.
They're busy around the studio right now as we speak.
They make us look good, and thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Best they can.
Now, my memory is a classic, but I had to include it because we were actually there.
Right.
The 2004 ALCS, the Red Sox were teamed against the Yankees. And they lost the first 3 games of the series.
And I was at Game 3 where they got slaughtered 19-8 and went down 3-0 in the series. So
they were down 3-0.
You got luck of the draw.
And Deb and we had good tickets, planned to go. And just like she did when we went to the Clemens game, she says, I don't know if I want to go to a game and see the Yankees beat us on our home park. I said, it's a playoff game. We gotta go. So reluctantly, she came along, and we had decent seats. We were up in the middle of section 24, and the game was going along close.
And it was an 8 o'clock game, so it was.
I think it was 8:20.
Yeah, right.
It was close, but it was one of these games like all the Red Sox Yankee games that are slow. Everything was slow. Everything was slow. I'm going to cut to the chase. The Red Sox were losing 4-3 going into the last of the ninth.
They were.
And no one was giving up hope. But who was on the mound but Mariano Rivera, who hadn't given up a run since the Ice Age. So hopes were dashed. Casey was going to come up at the bat, but he wasn't going to get a hit. Well, the leadoff batter was the good old Kevin Millar, Debbie's favorite.
Yes.
Everybody's favorite. It's just He may not be the greatest player, but he's one of the greatest people.
Mr. Personality.
Mr. Personality.
Right.
And he worked Rivera for a walk.
Great at bat, by the way.
And I can't understand why Rivera would walk him.
I don't know.
And the pitch that walked him almost hit him.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
It wasn't like a bad call. So there's Millar perched on first. Immediately he's pulled for Dave Roberts to run for him. And I think if they put it on the screen in center field, it would have said, he is now going to try to steal a base. You didn't have to
there was
wonder
no question.
if he's going to steal. and everyone knew it.
Everyone knew. Yep.
So first pitch, he steals and he makes it.
Barely makes
He was in just, but Jeter didn't tag him out.
No, right.
Jeter missed somebody.
Right.
Just by it, but he was safe. And that has gone down as one of the great moments in baseball, base running
Dave
history.
Roberts steal.
Now, to me, what happened following that was greater.
Yes.
Billy Miller came up. Now, Billy Miller was a batting title winner.
He was.
It was a good ball player, but he was journeyman. And he hit a ball up the middle. Rivera tried to pull a rocket.
Tuukka Rask and just blocking.
He threw out his leg and it went right under his thigh, up center field, and Roberts scored, and the place went berserk.
Tie game.
Now, why is Roberts immortalized and no one can even remember who got the hit?
Miller
That always seems so unfair to me that he got the hit that tied it up.
Right.
And then the anguish started.
Oh my God.
It was 4-4. It was getting on toward midnight. A sign came up that said, the subway is going to stop running at 12:30, so if you need a ride home on the T, you better leave now. Nobody left.
Nobody left.
And the extra innings, the 3 extra innings, were excruciating. There was chance after chance.
Oh, my God.
And we started making friends with everybody in the area.
God.
Every time there was an out, we'd high five. Every time someone got on base, we'd all clutch each other. We were like 150 people in a group, all agonizing together. And then finally, at 1:20 in the morning, last of the 12th, in fact, I should say before that, the Red Sox pitcher in the top of the 12th was the immortal Curtis Leskanic.
Curtis Leskanic, who was like the last guy they had in the bullpen. And he came in and he got the Yankees out right away.
And he never pitched again.
Never pitched
That was
again.
it. Curtis Leskanic, no one out there remembers him. If you do, you're more of a freak than we are.
Right. But he was the last guy out of the bullpen. They didn't have anybody else.
So the Yankees had to bring in the immortal Paul Quantrill.
Yes.
Paul Quantrill, another famous name in history. Manny leads off with a single. Place goes nuts. Poppy comes up and hits one 30 rows over the bleachers.
Yeah, right.
And place just goes absolutely insane. It's 1:30 in the morning. I don't know why most of Boston's sleeping people didn't complain.
I don't think anyone was sleeping.
But it just made the score 3-1 in terms of games. But as Kevin Millar had said, don't let us
win tonight. And you could feel the momentum change when he hit that homer.
Oh,
I have to tell
the favorite thing for us was coming home. It's going on toward 2:15, 2:30. And we had a tape of the Dropkick Murphys in the car.
Right. Yeah.
Coming into Lunenburg, we turned Tessie, their theme song, up full blast. And we went by a cop who honked the horn and waved at us. He was so happy because he knew where we'd been and didn't say anything about the fact that we're blasting the radio down the street. You can't forget a memory like that. It was just precious.
And from the perspective of someone who was watching it at home, it was just as intense when you were watching it on TV. I mean, it really was like, at about midnight, we kind of went from, my wife and I kind of migrated from the living room to the bedroom. We said, Jesus, we got to get up tomorrow. And it didn't matter. We were just wide awake watching everything. And you're right. It was excruciating. The Yankees would get 2 guys on, and then they'd get out of it. And the Sox would leave a guy on. Then the next inning, Yankees would have a guy on. It was absolute. And the later it got, you weren't tired. It was just pure adrenaline at that point.
It was fortunate that they stopped selling beer after the
Oh,
seventh
God.
inning.
Yeah.
Because if they hadn't, no one would have seen the 12th inning.
Yeah, and just an aside, game 4 is the famous one. People forget that Game 5 was just as excruciating as Game 4.
It lasted 14
Game 5
innings.
went 14 innings,
14
and you had Tim Wakefield coming out of the bullpen, throwing the ball all over the place, and the Yankees were leaving guys on everywhere. Games 4 and 5, and it happened within like a 40-hour window.
That's right.
Because if you remember at Poppy's press conference after it's over, he said, "All right, get some sleep. We'll see you later today." Because they had the game. I think it was at like 6 o'clock the next night.
Yep.
So we'd all been awake for about 40 hours by the time Game 5
And what's
was
interesting
over.
about the series is those were the climactic games.
Yeah.
Because when they went down to New York, they blew them away.
Yeah, Game 6 was a little hairy, but 7 they blew them out.
Damon knocked in
Damon
7
knocked in
runs in
7
2
runs.
innings.
Yeah.
But that's one of the classic games I've ever been to. One of the classic memories that was just so.
So we both have our Poppy memories to congratulate him on his induction.
Okay. It's trivia time.
It's trivia time.
It's trivia time.
Yes, it's
For you
trivia.
tuning in for the first time in the 8th season, I have a question for Jason.
Okay. So what is my trivia question
There are
today?
86 pitchers in the Hall of Fame.
Okay.
86 pitchers.
Okay.
14 of them played at one time with the Red Sox.
Okay.
How many of those 14 played only with the Red Sox?
Of the pitchers or just regular players?
Of the pitchers.
Of the
14 pitchers
of the
Played.
pitchers.
played with the Red Sox at some time.
Okay.
How many of them were only Red Sox?
Wow.
That's your question.
Do you want an answer now or,
No,
or
no,
later
no.
on
This
in the
is
show?
trivia.
Okay.
This is trivia.
So ponder it and we'll get back
Ponder
to
that.
it.
You
Okay.
folks out there, see if you can think of someone who is in the Hall of Fame who played just with the Red Sox
As a pitcher.
as a pitcher.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right. Now
Okay.
what we're going to be doing is we said started last year, but we didn't get a chance to finish it
Right.
because we had our memorial to Jerry Remy at the end of last season.
Right.
We picked players at each position who ought to be in the Hall of Fame.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
Now, I had picked Jim Cott
Yes.
as the left-handed pitcher.
Who was
He was inducted into the Hall of Fame since our last show.
right?
So I had to pick someone else.
Right. So I chose Ted Simmons in the past, and he got elected, and you chose
right.
Jim Cott. He got elected. So hey, well, I guess we're psychic. We know what we're doing here. So I'm going to kick this off, and this is a recent one. Was just on the ballot. I'm picking the right-hander. You're picking the left-hander
Yes,
for
that's right,
for
that's right.
pitchers. And my right-hander, we've talked about him before. I'm sorry. I have to go with Roger Clemens. It is absolutely insane that Rocket Roger is not in the Hall of Fame. We've said before on this show, whatever steroid allegations there are, we don't care. I don't care about steroid things. He never failed the steroid test when he was in Major League Baseball. That's what I have to go on. And it is absolutely insane that he's not in the Hall of Fame. There were so many accomplishments, but just so you know, 7 Cy Young Awards, also had a 2nd and 2/3, 354 wins, which no one's ever going to get close to that again, the way baseball is nowadays. Over 4,600 Ks, a 143 adjusted ERA. He had an MVP, and he had 10 seasons where he got MVP votes as a pitcher, which is remarkable. And he had 220 strikeout games, one of which we were at, as we've recounted in the past. And it was very disappointing, this voting cycle. Clemens was right at the cusp. And
I can't hold it any longer.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about this later.
yeah.
Baseball's Hall of Fame is not Fatima. It's not a shrine that you go to worship at.
100%.
It's a museum.
Absolutely.
Where they show people that played their profession very well.
Absolutely.
Why is the Football Hall of Fame, the Hockey Hall of Fame, the Basketball Hall of Fame, I've been to the Bowling Hall of Fame, treated with this kind of scrutiny
Right.
and personal reference?
Right, yep.
You don't think football players that go into the blue tent have something done to them
Right,
that
right.
might not be legal?
Right.
That they analyze baseball's Hall of Fame like it's more than, it should be just a place to go and see good players.
100%.
The pitcher that won the most Cy Youngs, the batter that got the most home runs and the batter that got the most hits aren't in it.
Aren't in the Hall of Fame.
What's wrong with that picture?
It's not some sacrosanct thing that only the holiest of holy players gets it. It's a museum. It's a Hall of Fame. And if you want to put in the writing under suspicion of steroids, he did this. Fine, put that on the plaque or something like that. But just to pretend these guys didn't exist, I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous. I'm sorry. Clemens, Bonds, Rose, they should all be in. It was disappointing because Clemens was right on the cusp. He was right about 75 until the last day or two, and then he dropped off to about 66, I think was his...
we'll talk about Hall of Fame.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
I had to say that.
But 100%
I'm just so tired of listening to these people analyze these people's lives.
Right. The character clause.
The character clause.
And if you look at the original way that it was written, the character clause was supposed to be about the way he played on the field.
That's right.
It says character on the field conduct. It doesn't say anything about off the field conduct. That's something totally different. So, Rocket, well, I know that he was very vocal and he said, it doesn't mean anything to me. I put it in the rearview mirror. Rocket, I'm sorry, you should be there. You should have been there years ago. So, that's my pick.
That's your pick?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go with a left-hander, Billy Wagner. Billy Wagner isn't as well known to New England because he did not play in New England. Mostly with the Astros, the Phillies, the Mets, and Atlanta.
There he is right there,
Billy
Wagner.
Billy Wagner. But he had a remarkable talent for striking people out. I hate to burden you with a lot of statistics, but he had 11.9 strikeouts per 9 innings average in his career, 33.2% strikeout rate. One of every 3 batters he faced in his career, he struck out. Highest in Major League history, lowest number of hits, 5.9 hits in a full game.
Yep.
Those are 3 remarkable stats.
Highest strikeout per 9. He has the lowest whip in history, and he has the second highest adjusted ERA, only behind Mariano Rivera in history. That's pretty impressive for a relief pitcher. It's amazing.
It's just for instance, in Atlanta in 2010, he was 7-2. His ERA was 1.43. In 69 innings, he struck out 104 batters and had 37 saves.
Right.
To go along with the 7 wins.
And that was before this era right now where everybody just strikes out 200 times a year. He wasn't facing current batters. This is about 20 years ago he was doing this.
In 15 consecutive seasons, he had more strikeouts than innings pitched.
It's amazing. I mean,
15, that's a long period of time to maintain that.
I'm 100% with you. I think personally, he's the second best reliever ever behind Mariano Rivera. I really think that. In terms of just keeping guys off base, his one ding is that his postseason numbers weren't great, but that's a 10-inning sample size.
He didn't play with
worried about that.
And he, like a lot of these guys, he didn't play with the right people. He didn't play with the Cardinals or the Dodgers or the Yankees.
Right, yeah.
That get him the great press attention.
Right. He went to the World Series once with the Mets, and it was that fluky 0-1 team that sort of willed its way in and wasn't very good in the first place.
And the Astros were not good.
Right.
And who watched an Astros game?
Right. Right.
Seriously. He was not. He had no iconic moments.
Right.
But his total overall record is just extraordinary.
Yeah.
I think he ended up with 50% of the votes this year.
He was
About
just
50%.
over 50.
So he is likely to make it
He
down
could
the
make
line.
it.
But he also was a reliever. It's just like with a DH, they don't regard them as really full-time players.
And he was the hardest thrower I ever saw. Everybody nowadays throws 97, 98, 99. He was throwing 100 every single pitch, every time out. And this was through the early 2000s. It was unbelievable. Every single pitch was just this full-out effort in nothing fancy. He didn't even really have an off-speed pitch. He just came in and blew you away.
Yeah. And he was in 7 All-Star games. He was highly regarded, but I don't think he is getting the credit now.
I agree.
Again, if you're talking about the Hall of Fame being achievements.
Right. I agree.
I don't think there was any kind of thing he was involved with, the steroid accusation.
No, never.
He had a clean record.
Right.
But he just was not the kind of guy that was on everyone's lips.
Right. And to put it in perspective, think about how many closers come and go. I mean, what's the life of a closer that the Red Sox? I mean, they had Papelbon for a few years, but usually teams change closers every 2, 3, 4 years. Guys come and go, and they have a couple good seasons and fade out. Wagner was on top of his game for 15 seasons.
Right.
I mean, elite.
There's a Hoffman, there's a Rivera, and they are rare.
Right, yeah.
Eckersley had a while, but he also was something else.
Smoltz was,
same thing.
yeah, right. But I'm 100% with you on that. Interestingly, how he threw lefty, there's a cool story behind how he became a left-hander.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
When he was 7, now I don't know who he was playing with. When he was 7 years old, he was playing football and broke his right arm.
Right.
After he removed the cast, he broke it again.
Broke it again. Yep.
So he started throwing with his left hand just because he didn't want it to be known as Pete Gray.
Right. So
he started throwing with his left hand, and fortunately,
who knew?
I mean, maybe if he hadn't broken his arm, he could have thrown harder with his right arm.
Who knew? Yeah, how do you know that?
But that's the way he became a lefty was by
chance.
and what kind of football do you play when you're 7?
I have no idea. I can't imagine. Imagine having to switch over to your glove hand like that. I don't know. He struck everybody out. He didn't do a lot of fielding apparently, but I just can't imagine completely reversing yourself like that and figuring that out on the fly. So Clemens and Wagner, you guys both should be there. As you said, Wagner is sort of rising in the ranks right now, and I really hope he gets in because he's certainly deserving of it.
So what we'll show you in our next show, which we had intended to do in the last show, was our rosters.
Yes. Right.
For the 2 players at each position
Right.
that we believe should be in the Hall of Fame. Right. Maybe we'll start our own.
Yes.
And we'll charge much less than Cooperstown.
Right. But we tell far better stories on Talking Baseball.
So look for that. We'll have our first base right through these guys today.
Right. So we'll recap because this is all through last year. Probably our memories aren't that great. Yours probably aren't either that you remember way back when we started doing this. I don't even know if I remember all mine. I got to look back.
Well, I have all 60 tapes.
Oh yes, we can. And they're on YouTube if you want to watch them.
That's right, folks. All our shows are in a folder on YouTube.
Yes, the plug. So.
With the old
music. Yes. So hopefully they won't get taken down.
Okay. Now here's time for the trivia answer.
Okay.
Review. There are 86 pitchers in the Hall of Fame. 14 of them played for the Red Sox at some point. How many of them played only with the Red Sox?
I don't think any of them did.
You're right.
I don't think any. Yep.
Absolutely right. There's not one single pitcher that spent his entire career with the Red Sox that's in the Hall of Fame.
Amazing, isn't it?
Now, I got to cause them to that.
Okay.
And this is not a quiz question, but just see how you can do.
Okay.
There are only 3 of the 14 that play with the Red Sox that went into the Hall of Fame with a Red Sox cap.
Okay. Well, Pedro. Pedro's definitely one. Let's see. Wow, that's got to be going back some.
Yes, it is.
Wow. Let's see. Oh, isn't Lefty Grove in as a Red Sox?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes,
Lefty
he is.
Grove is another.
Good for you.
Who would the third one be?
You're gonna have to go back to the 20s.
Oh, it's back further than that. Oh, they were terrible in the 20s.
They had one guy.
Oh, it's got to be Herb Pennock then.
Good for you. Good for you.
He's the only guy in the 20s that they.
Good for you.
Oh, Herb Pennock. Okay, now this is for people who.
Good for you.
This is for people who don't believe that believe that wins are everything. All right, I remember the Sox were terrible in the 20s. And Herb Pennock was with the Sox in the 20s, and he had a terrible record with them. Got traded to the Yankees, and all of a sudden he started winning all these games because the Yankees were awesome. And guess what? None of his other numbers changed very much. His ERA was the same, his interior stats, his strikeouts, his walks, everything was the same. But when you go from the worst team to the best team, guess what? You start winning.
That's right.
Once you said 20s, it had to be Herb
right.
Pennock. He was the only guy that was on those 20s teams.
Yeah, he didn't do much with the Sox,
No.
but he apparently liked his years with the team and chose to go in.
Right. I didn't know he was a Wow, that's
I didn't
cool.
either. I looked it up.
Yeah. Well, the 20s was the big clue. He was the only guy they had
Herb
in the
Pennock.
20s. Yeah,
You know?
and we'll get in. Maybe we should talk about Lefty Grove sometime. Talk about an underrated pitcher. I don't think people realize how good Lefty Grove was. Oh man, Lefty Grove had some crazy
And
years.
it's interesting that he picked the Sox because he won more games than the Athletics.
Sure did. He sure did.
But he was a victim of Connie Mack's.
Right.
Anytime Connie Mack built up a good team, he sold his players
sold
all
it all,
off,
yeah, right,
started
yeah,
over again
right.
to make some money.
Yeah. So if you look at the history of the A's when Connie Mack on them, up, and down here, and then up and down. That's how he did his business. He would just purge all his good guys all at once.
Okay, so that's the trivia question.
All right,
No
cool.
Red Sox pitcher has ever made the Hall of Fame pitching just with the Red Sox.
Wow.
And there aren't a heck of a lot of pitchers that pitched a long time that stayed with the Red Sox either.
No. Well, does Clemens have? Clemens has. He's not in the Hall of Fame, but Clemens has more than any of the pitchers that are in the Hall of Fame, I think, doesn't he?
Probably.
With the Red Sox?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
the Hall of Fame.
He has to have more than any Hall of Famer.
Cy Young, I think, was a few, must be pretty close.
Yeah.
No, but he would win 40 games a year. So
Right,
it
yeah,
wasn't.
right.
But some of the longtime pitchers that stayed with him never made the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Guys like Frank Sullivan and Tom Brewer.
Oh, all those guys
kind
from
of
the
guys.
yeah, right.
But that's an interesting fact that
Yeah.
there's no Red Sox that ever played his entire career that made the Hall of Fame.
Well, there's position guys, Yaz
Yes,
and
oh, yeah,
Williams
oh, yeah,
and Rice
oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
Dorr and
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are several
Yeah.
position guys, but no
No
pitcher.
pitcher.
It's funny because especially nowadays, pitchers are kind of nomads anyway. I mean, how many pitchers have been with one team their whole career in the last 20 years or so? Almost nobody.
Since free agency.
Right, since free agency, it doesn't matter. It's
Back in the days of Whitey Ford,
yeah.
he could have probably, even though he's a Yankee, if they'd had free agency then, he would have been a Dodger.
Oh, sure, oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, right. and that's what's funny. People think, well, back in the days when guys were loyal. If free agency happened in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, guys wouldn't be loyal. They'd have signed with the biggest paying team, just like everybody nowadays
They're loyal to
does.
the billfold in their back pocket.
Absolutely. They're loyal to the players' union and who pays the check for them. So,
Well, we told you that just 2 days ago, the Hall of Fame voting took place.
Right.
And we have a new Red Sox Hall of Famer, David Ortiz.
David Ortiz, Big Papi.
And it's, as they say, a first ballot
first ballot Hall of Famer.
So there's tiers of
yeah,
how
right,
good.
right. So the first ballot is the ultimate Hall of
right.
Fame election.
Yeah, you don't have to sit around and wait for your statistics to change.
Right, right. Like Jim Rice did.
Yes.
Over 15 years, he suddenly got good enough to go in. Figure that one out. So he got in. There he is, Big Papi, 77% of the vote.
Yep.
He cleared it by quite a bit. He cleared it by 2%. And he was the only one inducted this year of anyone on the ballot. And I don't know if you were watching when he got inducted. They had the camera right there, and Pedro was right next to him. The two of them started hugging each other. He's the fourth Dominican ever to be inducted into the Hall of Fame after Pedro and Marichal and Guerrero. He's the fourth one.
You know, it's interesting, the fact that they had a camera there. The voting actually takes place for the Hall of Fame on December 31st.
Right.
So it has been known by the baseball powers that be. It's not like Price Waterhouse.
Right, yeah, right. Where nobody knows ahead of time. Yeah.
They know who's going to make it because there was a camera in his house with Pedro there.
Right.
They wouldn't set that all up and say, sorry, David.
Yeah, you missed by 3 votes. Yeah.
And they did not have a camera set up at Bonds or Clemens' house.
No, they didn't. So they knew ahead of time.
They knew ahead of time.
Yeah. And well, I think they draw it out because, they make the votes public and all this stuff, and there's a Hall of Fame tracker and everything over those 3 weeks. But we thought we would be remiss if we didn't bring this up. So we're going to get into this, but you know that we've always had we always thought the process for the Hall of Fame voting is very suspect. Now, how the Hall of Fame vote works is that the only people who vote are sports writers. Now, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, when they put these rules into place of who would get to vote.
The first Hall of Fame voting was 1937, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
And the writers thought it up.
Right.
They thought, we'll do it. Well, 1937, who went to the ballgame?
Exactly. It made sense then because the writers were the ones. No, there was no TV, there was radio, but there was no MLB network. You relied on newspapers.
That's right.
And so the writers were the ones that traveled with the team. They saw the guys day in and day out. And they saw the opposing teams as well. They didn't just see your home team. So it sort of made sense that they would be the most knowledgeable of all the people involved in baseball.
There was a newspaper called the Sporting News, which published the box scores of every game.
Right, every game.
So the writers would scour those.
Right.
And these days, the writers, when they come into the press box, get a 20-page package
Right.
of all sorts of statistics. So the idea was the writers knew baseball better than anybody.
Right. And 90 years later, almost, that is not the case at all. In fact, the writers actually, I think, know very little about baseball compared to some of the other people who are involved in the sport. Now, we can't overlook this. You know, we get to rank on Dan Shaughnessy all the time. I don't know if you saw this. Dan Shaughnessy, Exhibit A of why you should take the voting away from some of these writers. He filled out a ballot that had only Jeff Kent. Now,
For 2 years in a row.
2 years in a row. Now, we've talked about Jeff Kent. He's a borderline Hall of Famer. I have no issue with him getting in.
Got 30%.
Right. But the only guy on the ballot who should get in? I mean, come on. That's absolutely ridiculous. You know, and he said, well, he was the only one who didn't have a taint of steroids or some. You bypassed Roland and Wagner, who were both better choices, never suspected of steroids, you know, in favor of Jeff Kent. Maybe he feels a kindred spirit because Jeff Kent was widely known as the biggest jerk in baseball during his career. So maybe Shaughnessy feels like I'm the biggest jerk in sports writing. That's my guy. I'm sailing my ship with him right there. So the kindred spirits of Kent and Shaughnessy right there. But you know, there were three or four other guys who just passed in a blank ballot. See, now with this year's class, how do you pass in a blank ballot? How do you do that? I don't get it.
It's like going to a political election,
right,
and passing in a blank ballot.
Right.
People do,
right.
So why bother to go?
Right, right, exactly.
But it counts for the percentage.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
And I think that stinks.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Now, I was listening to the unending talk shows about this, and one guy was complaining that over half of the voters voted for 10 people because they could.
Yeah.
He was complaining about that.
So what? As we said, it's a museum. If 10 guys are worthy, then vote for 10 guys. I mean, I would have had no problem filling out 10 guys on that ballot this year. No problem at all.
Papelbon got 1 vote.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
He's going to be off, just like the time the Gammons voted for Remy.
Jerry Remy.
He's not going to get in.
Right.
But you might have a favorite player that what you saw of him was worthy.
Sure.
But just to pass in a blank ballot or just one person is wrong.
Yeah.
And especially now that all the ballots have to be revealed.
Exactly.
And interestingly, there's this service online that you can tune in called the Tracker.
Yeah.
And it lists what percentage of votes have come in,
right,
and who they were,
right,
and who they voted for,
right,
and who they represented.
Right. Yep.
Like our friend Gordon Needs, who no longer writes for the Boston Globe, who's now with Bali Sports.
Right.
So he had a vote.
Right.
And he voted for 7 guys.
Right. And it shows who each writer voted for.
That's
It's
right.
a little grid.
Yep.
And it even shows if somebody voted for someone in the past but didn't, or vice versa.
Right.
Someone added it, and it's just a percentage of it shows the percentage, keeps track of every player. It's pretty cool to look at.
But interestingly, I checked it an hour before the final vote was tallied.
Yeah.
Or revealed, I won't say tallied.
Right.
Only 50% of the writers had done that.
Right.
And it always says, and I never can quite figure what the thinking is, it always says the vote totals that players have will go down when they reveal everyone's votes. Does that mean there's a lot of people that just didn't vote?
Absolutely. I think so.
And didn't want you to know it.
Right. I think so. I think anyone who doesn't make his or her ballot public has some kind of agenda that doesn't want to be revealed. It's either a blank ballot or it's some kind of protest vote or some agenda like I'm never voting for a steroid guy, but I don't, or I am voting for a steroid guy, and I don't want people to scrutinize my vote, so I'm not going to make it public. I 100% agree with you on that. And so we started thinking about who, in an ideal world, who should be voting for the Hall of Fame. Because there are lots of people besides sports writers who, as we said, nowadays, when every single fan across the country has access to every game with the MLB package and MLB network, the fans know a lot more than the writers about a lot of these players.
I'd be willing to bet you right now, I watched more games this year than Dan Shaughnessy did.
Oh, 100%.
You think he watched 160 games?
Of course he didn't. No, of course he didn't. No. And you have less of an agenda.
I mean, someone like Ron Chandler that we've had on this show, who runs this baseball fantasy magazine, and has to figure out statistics for all the players up and coming. He has scrutinized every player. In fact, why not go back to the shredder, and just feed statistics in and let a machine figure it out?
Or why doesn't Bill James have a vote? I mean, Bill James invented sabermetrics pretty much, and so in an ideal world, I think these are people who should have the vote, and with the caveat that you vote responsibly. If you hand in a blank ballot 2 years in a row, see ya. You lose your vote.
Right.
You have to have some kind of responsibility with your vote that you're
They
going to
allow people who have retired from writing to continue to vote.
Sure. Oh, for
They
sure.
supposedly have to put in a voucher that says something to the effect of, yes, I've been keeping track of what's been going on. I watched 140 game on Saturday night.
Yeah, I watched. Yeah, right. And if you do hand in a blank ballot once, okay, fine. Once in a while, justified. But if the people who hand in the blank ballot year after year, which some guys do, the writers should have a vote. But also, how about ex-players?
Wait a minute now.
Yeah.
In this Hall of Fame, there are 5 other players going in.
Right.
They were picked by 16 ex-players.
Oh, yes, right. The Veterans Committee.
The Veterans Committee is made up of 16 ball players, and they put everybody in.
Right, of course they do.
So this Hall of Fame is going to have Ortiz plus 5 other guys that they picked.
Right, Ortiz, Cott, and other guys. So, but why don't ex-players take part? Why don't they get ballots? I don't understand why they don't get regular voting ballots. Ex-players saw everybody play. They know the ins and outs of the game.
Why don't broadcasters and telecasters
I was just
vote?
going to say, other media members. Why doesn't Joe Castiglione get a vote? I mean, he's been broadcasting for 40 years.
There were no TVs around in 37.
Right.
Now, these guys, and the guys on TV in those stations, spend hours talking and analyzing
Of course they
things,
do.
which the writers don't do.
Why didn't Jerry Remy get a vote? I mean, 15 years as a player and 30 in the broadcast booth. You think he doesn't know baseball? I mean, come on. Or Vince Scully? Why doesn't Vince Scully's seen more baseball than Shaughnessy has in his life?
There's a whole slew of other people that should be allowed to vote.
Absolutely. Oh, sure. And I would add in ex-managers and coaches, ex-umpires. Umpires saw every single player on the planet. Why wouldn't umpires?
Especially
have a
now
say?
that there's no National and American League umpires separate.
Right.
Because they see every player.
Sure. Or executives, like VPs, general managers. Why wouldn't
if they're going to put the executives like Tom Yawkey in the Hall of Fame, why don't they have some say about it?
100%. And I will go this far. I think the fans should have a vote too. The fans pay to get into the Hall of Fame. Why shouldn't they have a say in it? And this is what I suggest to do for the fans. Have an online ballot, an online regular Hall of Fame ballot, and just like a regular voter, you can pick up to 10 names. And at the end of the day, on December 31st, you tally all the online ballots, and the top 10 guys from the fan vote, that counts as say, 5 votes or however you want to prorate it. Because I think 1 isn't fair. I don't think the fans should get regulated to 1, but maybe make it equal to like 5 votes. And those 10 guys
at least have a say.
Right, get 5 votes apiece because the fans are the ones that watch the games and they pay to get in the Hall of Fame.
You remember, Jake, for many years the fans picked the All-Star team.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, I used to love going to Fenway.
Oh, yeah.
And you get these little cards.
Oh, you have to poke
them out.
The hanging chads.
And we put 100 votes in for all the Red Sox players.
Right. And
one year Cincinnati voted in their whole team.
They did. Yeah, the commissioner stepped in and said, you can't do that.
You got to put Willie Mays in.
Right. Well, or what we used to do is, because we want the American League to win, we'd vote for the worst National League players. Oh, I never heard of this guy. Put him in. Let's put him on the NL team. Oh, yeah. We used to do that all the time.
Why not? I mean, the fans are paying the bill.
Of course they
are. Fans are going to Cooperstown.
Right. Absolutely.
And going to Cooperstown on the day that they have the Hall of Fame day, you can't get near the place.
Oh, people are already, the day Poppy got elected, which was 2 days ago, people are already saying, I can't get any closer than Utica to stay in Cooperstown.
That's
They're
right.
already selling rooms for July when the induction ceremony is, 6 months from now. So good luck.
Anytime, like when Jeter got in.
Oh, for sure.
All New York
Oh,
went there,
yeah,
you
of
know.
course. Yeah.
So-
And it would be cool to go. I'd love to go to an induction ceremony.
So
but
why
good
not
luck.
let the fans have a say?
Absolutely, 100%.
Not just a sour writer.
Yeah, right. And the thing is, I think everyone we listed, you're going to get some people who are, like you said, are sour. I think the players and the fans and the managers and the broadcasters, they are much less likely to have an agenda than the writers do.
Right.
A lot of the writers have an agenda. I didn't like this guy, so I'm not going to vote for him.
He didn't give me a good interview.
Right,
I
right,
know,
yeah,
I
right.
know, I've spoken to a few of my friends who were writers
Yep.
who had a real thing against certain players because
Absolutely.
they wouldn't talk to them.
Right, Ted Williams. People didn't vote for Ted Williams because he didn't give him a good interview. Oh,
Dan Shaughnessy tried to interview, was it Bell?
yes.
Who said, said to Gordon, take you and your curly-headed
Oh,
friend.
it was Carl Everett.
Carl
it was
Everett.
Carl Everett.
That's
yeah.
right, that's who it
Take your
was.
curly-haired boyfriend and get out of here. Right.
So he didn't want to talk to them. So what do you think? They're going to vote for him for the Hall of Fame?
Of course they're not. Nope.
I just don't like it personally. It's just
Right.
Ted Williams had the same thing. One of the reasons Rice had a hard time
Oh,
getting
for
in
sure. Rice
because he
didn't-
was not cooperative with the writers.
Right. Yeah. And to this day that happens. You
Who-
know?
who's not going to be cooperative with a telecaster?
Right.
Or someone that does fantasy baseball?
Right.
Who's not going to care about that?
Right. Yeah. Do you think Bill James really cares about how guys act off the field or in the clubhouse? That's not what it's about. I mean, come on. So, and again, I think that's abusing that character clause that was put in there. The character clause was supposed to be how you acted on the field. And just as an aside, I have no idea, if you're not going to vote for Bonds and Clemens, I don't know how on earth you can justify a vote for Gary Sheffield. For those who don't know, Gary Sheffield is a jerk anyway. When he was with the Brewers, he hated Milwaukee. He intentionally made errors so the team would trade him and get him out of town. And he cost his team games and he cost his pitchers runs. Now, that, I'm sorry, is a character clause right there on the field. That's what you look at in a character clause. I don't care about how they were in the clubhouse. Give me a break.
I
with
just
that.
have to keep coming back to this.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think many people care about the Football Hall of Fame or could tell you the last 5 inductees.
Right.
When I went to the Bowling Hall of Fame, I recognized 2 names.
Right, right.
But baseball's Hall of Fame is like a holy shrine.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's
And
become that.
if you're on the wall and if you're a first ballot,
Oh, it's a,
and come on.
yeah, it's a museum. People.
It's just a
It
place
is-
to go and look at old stuff.
It is, and it's fascinating. It's a fantastic place to go, but it's a museum of the history of the game, and so I don't think it should be. Who gets enshrined should not be in the hands of such a small group.
And to
of
say it
people.
for our 200th time, baseball is a business.
It's a business. Yes, it is.
It's
It
a
is a
business that makes money for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yep. So you know what? Putting Poppy in the Hall of Fame is a good business move. And putting Clemens and Bonds in is a good business move. It is. Now, it's bad business to not have the 3 biggest names in the history of the game. not in
What's
your Hall of
really
Fame.
the difference between that and having a Hall of Fame for people that started great websites? I mean,
That's right. That's right.
Zuckerberg is worshipped by more people than anybody in the world. Made more money than anybody in the world. Let's put him in the Hall of Fame.
Right. Exactly.
Have a Hall of Fame for those guys.
Right.
They have more influence on our lives than a guy hitting the ball.
All right. Yeah, they do. Absolutely, they do.
So,
And you know, just we sort of have to wrap it up here, but just to say, you know, there's this whole mentality that some of the old school writers have of, well, they didn't do it back in that day. They had honor. Okay, we've talked about it before. Gaylord Perry used to put Vaseline on the ball. Whitey Ford had a wedding ring that had a cut in it. And he would rub the ball against his wedding ring so the ball would cut and he would get guys out. Come on.
read Jim Bouton's Ball 4. Everybody took greenies.
Exactly. Everybody.
I mean, they didn't ban them, but they were drugs.
Well, and the thing is, you were a pariah if you didn't, because it meant the mentality was if you did, they call them beanies.
Yeah.
If you didn't bean up, you weren't at the top of your game. I mean, that was the mentality in the 70s and 80s.
right.
When the beanies, they were out like candy bowls. So that whole mentality of they didn't do it. Yeah, they did. Everybody cheated. Everybody tried to get an edge somehow. For the last 150 years, that's the way it's been.
So we're going to wrap that up because there's just one thing we need to talk about. Baseball right now is in a lockout.
Right.
And that's dangerous because it's only 2 weeks or 3 weeks till pitchers and catchers are supposed to report.
Mid-February, yes.
And they're not going to make that deadline. Pitchers need time to build up their strength. That's going to knock back spring training, which could knock back the beginning of the season. And if you want to knock a business apart, don't have games.
Yeah,
they're really running a risk.
They really are, and and there are all these little points. We're not going to get into them now. There are all these points that the players have and the owners have, and they're trying to see eye to eye on things. And I want to look at the owners and say, I'm sorry, if you don't pay the players, there's no game.
Well, what they're trying to do, the players are trying to do, is reduce the number of years a team can own a player.
Right,
and that. If you sign a player and he does well for a couple of years and he becomes a free agent after a couple of years, how can you possibly build a club?
Right. That's right.
And the players say, well, you have your best seasons in your early years, so you should be paid for them. Everybody knows you're always paid for what you did, not what you do.
Absolutely. Right. You're paid for your past, not for your future.
Right.
100%. Right. So. Oh, and there were things about a minimum salary they're talking about. They want to raise the minimum. The players want to raise that. And the good thing is that they seem to be on the same page about hooking up minor leaguers more. Yep. Minor leaguers are going to make more money. They're going to have better accommodations, more rights as players, which for years, minor leaguers have just been paid peanuts.
That's right.
And they have to lodge with families and things like that. So that's a good thing that they do agree on. 100% on board with that.
So I would hope that by our next show, at least there'll be enough talking so we can spend some time analyzing what we think it should be done with this contract.
Hopefully there will be a spring training by the time we have another show.
And I got to say, this is something that pleases me. Here's the 2022 Red Sox schedule.
Yes.
They open on March 31st against Tampa Bay at home. I hope you have warm clothes on.
Pack your hats and gloves.
We are about to undergo supposedly the worst blizzard in the history of the Northeast, and they're going to 2 months from now be playing baseball in Fenway Park.
Under that storm, probably under the same snow that we're going to be buried in this weekend. And my good thing, the West Coast is all one trip. Yes, thank you. We only get 9 days of staying up till 1 in the morning to watch games.
And our National League games are against the Central Division.
Right.
Because I'm so sick of playing the Mets.
Right. Yeah, we get the Brewers and the Pirates for once.
That's
teams
right.
we never get to see.
And the Cardinals.
And the Cardinals,
The Cardinals are my birthday. Yes. That's a given.
That's going to cost you a fortune to go to that game.
It's a business.
It's a business. It's a business, right? So, we're going to wrap things up right now, again, with our ending theme music that's new.
That's right.
And enjoy that on the way
and
out.
Say again, thanks to Joe and Debbie and Dan for doing such a great job with us.
And thanks to you for watching. We always appreciate our audience. We always like to sit and chat with those who like to watch us. Thanks for keeping us afloat for 7 seasons into 8 seasons now.
Until next time, we'll see you anon.
Take care, everyone.
Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and mac and jack. I don't care if I ever get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win at the game, on it 1, 2, 3 cycle out at the old ball game. Casey for all the games, knew the players by their first name, told the umpire he was more.
Thank you for watching another outstanding program provided to you by Lunenburg Public Access. We're here to serve the community. Lunenburg Public Access is always looking for volunteers to help record town events, high school sports, and town meetings. Please consider helping us out today.